How crazily important sleep is. It affects your mood, your cognition, your physical performance, your reaction time, all this sort of stuff.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Struggle Climbing Show. It's me, Ryan, your host, and I am excited to have you here for this pro clinic on sleep and auto-regulation and all sorts of good stuff that happens between our ears as climbers. And we've got a true pro with us for this pro clinic, Dr. Lindsay Shaw. She is a sports psychologist and sports psychophysiologist, and those are hard words for me even to say, but she brings the schooling to this pro clinic for us here. And I actually first learned about Dr. Shaw from a conversation that I had with Kyra Condi on this show. As you might recall, we dove into all sorts of mindset stuff with Kyra, being an Olympic athlete and a high-performing professional climber. There's so much that goes into how we perform and how we prepare to perform with regard to mindset, mental game, and sleep. And Kyra just kind of scratched the surface there, but then she mentioned Dr. Shaw, whom she worked with as an Olympic athlete. Dr. Shaw, for 10 years, was on the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and she worked with the national team athletes from winter and summer teams to meet their performance and their clinical needs. And now, since moving on from her role there with the Olympic Committee, she works in professional sport, so she tells us a little bit about that, the sports team that she's working with, but she also works with high-performing individuals across any number of sports and also non-sports. She works with poker players and corporate professionals and all sorts of weekend warriors as well. She knows her stuff, I guess, is what I'm saying, and she brings those goods to this conversation here as we predominantly focus on how we regulate our nervous system, so up and down regulation. That's what starts our conversation here, and then we segue into sleep and the science of sleep, improving sleep, tips and tricks and hacks to improve our sleep, substances and supplements that we might use to improve our sleep, and why sleep is just so dang critical for performance on rock, as well as just in life. So anyway, so much good stuff in this one here. I'm already personally implementing some of the tips that Dr. Shaw had with regard to sleep, as well as up and down regulation. And I'm telling you, like, immediate results, immediate positive impact on how I feel and how well rested I am starting each day. So yeah, it's all in here. Let's just dive in right now with Dr. Lindsay Shaw. I think before we dive in, because I became aware of your work and who you were from this conversation that I had with Kyra Condi on the show, and she talked about some of the work that you all did together, and I just found it so fascinating. That was like my favorite part of the conversation. Honestly, the mental game chapter of my interviews with athletes is always just the most rich territory, I feel, for me, but also I think the audience as well. It's kind of what makes climbing so exciting. If it was just about strength metrics, we'd all just be doing like lifts or hangboard routines, but climbing brings in all of these other exciting aspects of movement and fear and expectation and mental game. And when she brought you up, there was like an immediate note. I was like, I need to talk to Lindsay. So thank you for taking the time. I'm excited that you're here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I think you just kind of like laid the foundation for why I love what I do, because like every person has a story and a passion and like something going on in their mind.
Yeah, and maybe we could start there, actually, if you wouldn't mind just giving the old 30,000-foot view of who you are, your background, your work. We know that you worked with Kyra for a bit of time, but I think you're working with a professional sports team right now, if I understand correctly. So if you could just give us a little cliff notes here on.
So I was a gymnast growing up, and gymnastics, kind of like climbing, you bump into these situations where you're like, wait a minute, I like just did that, and what's going on? I'm like nervous. I'm afraid. I'm like thinking. I was like always super attuned to there was more than just like my body performing, and that my mind played a huge role, and like sometimes to my benefit and sometimes to my detriment. So I was always super fascinated by that. And then I was fortunate when I was a teenager meet the sports psychologist who ended up mentoring me in grad school. Yeah, and I got out of grad school. I kind of got my dream job right away at the Olympic Committee, because of this like specialized interest in psychophysiology and like sleep. And yeah, I was there for about a decade. And now right after the Tokyo Olympics, I left to go to Major League Baseball. So I work for the Ohio team, the Cleveland Guardians.
Oh my gosh. So from Olympics to Major League Baseball, you're working with I mean, honest, it's got to be the most elite of elite athletes when you're talking about those pools of athletes that you're able to work with. And when you're on the Olympic committee, were you working with all sports, like all athletes, or was it just with the climbing team?
So I was hired like as like a psychophysiologist. I mean, I was trained as a sports psychologist. Like I was a licensed psychologist who had really specialized in sport performance issues. And yeah, so it was like right after the 2012, the London Games, some of the athletes said like, we've heard about this thing called biofeedback. We've heard about this thing called neurofeedback. So I was brought in to build a laboratory and like test it out. Is this going to actually work with like athletes in residence or athletes coming in for camps? Can we do remote training, all that sort of stuff? So initially I was really broadly assigned to like just athletes who were interested. And then over the years, I was kind of in a group that had track and field, and that's where climbing was included,
Right.
or bike sports, multi-sports. But then there was like figure skating was nearby in Colorado Springs. So I'd work with them, or, athletes would have kind of like a complex recovery from a head injury, and then I would get involved in their case. So like over the years, I kind of had different assignments, but because of the sleep interest and the psychophys interest, I ended up working with like a really diverse group of Olympic and Paralympic male, female athletes. It was, super fun.
And just out of curiosity, are there sport-specific kind of unique challenges that you've found, or are we all just kind of humans and experiencing very similar things?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, to be super stereotypical, like everyone deals with performance anxiety, right? Like you have this idea of what you want to accomplish and like, you can do it. And then it's like, well, can I do it under these certain circumstances? For athletes traveling like the World Cup circuit or to the Olympic Games, like of course, jet lag and time zone, like those types of things are going to come up. But I think like everyone's a human being. Everyone has a story. Everyone has like that like little voice in their head that's like, come on, you can do it. And then like some countering voice of like, but maybe I can't, or no, you can't. Like everyone has that in their own mind. So there's like a whole lot of humanity. And then there's some very specific, like I'd say like in climbing, there's really complex motor skills that like you need to sequence, which, like track and field is about like going as fast as you can possibly go without running as fast as you can, right? Because that'll interfere with the execution because you're an expert. All right. I mean, I worked with like lifting for a while and shooting. So there are some, like if you think about shooters, there's like kind of like a focus endurance, which totally comes up like in lead, right? Like
Sure.
that, that can happen.
It sounds like on the Venn diagram, there's a lot of central crossover area between a lot of these sports, but then each sport is going to have maybe its unique area that you want to zero in on. Obviously, this is a climbing podcast, so we'll be looking at this, in a majority through the lens of climbing. But feel free to weave in, any other learnings that you've picked up along the way working with all of these elite athletes. And you have worked predominantly, it sounds like, with elite athletes. And so for myself and many of the people who are listening right now, we are not elite athletes. We're weekend warriors. We participate in the sport because we love it and it brings us so much joy. But we're also driven and passionate about progressing, or many of the people who are, certainly the people who are listening to podcasts that focus on improving performance are going to be focused on that. And do you see any difference there for us? Are the stakes different in our minds? For me, if I've been working for a year to train and I want to go out and send this route that that I'm excited about, but I have a normal job that pays the bills and I've got a family and I've got a million other distractions, is there a significant difference in the way you would chat with somebody like me than somebody whose entire career is built around whether they can do this thing or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think like in the confines of your own mind, you're going to come up against similar things. Of course, there's like the practical constraints that 99% of the athletes that I've worked with in my career are only focused on their sport, and they're usually not, working in another job. So to that extent, I mean, there's probably some, I don't know, maybe you don't refine your approach like at the same like trajectory, but no, I mean, I think you'll have to tell me like okay, so there's this thing you've been working on for a whole year. What is the thing? And what's getting in the way outside of what's happening in your body?
Okay. I'm not quite ready to be psychoanalyzed.
Oh, okay.
Lindsay,
No, I don't have a couch. I've got like a couple chairs, you could just get comfortable.
Yeah, this is great. Close my eyes.
Yeah.
Ooh, no, I actually am really excited to have some kind of case studies, and there may be some general scenarios that I can throw at you from conversations that I've had with others that I've had on the show, but also happy to use myself as a bit of a guinea pig when we go through this conversation. And there's a few buckets that I want to look at because we could probably talk for 8 hours. It's such rich territory and quite complicated, at least for somebody like me, to try to parse out everything that's going on the mental side, the sports psychology side. But a couple things that have been on my mind that I've wanted to explore in depth on this show are sleep and something that Kyra talked about, which is kind of like finding ways to understand where we're at in terms of kind of our energy levels and our excitement levels, our stimulation levels. And so kind of she talked about like up and down regulating and some tools that she worked with you about when it came to just being in isolation before she needed to go out to do the thing, which again, for me, I'm not in isolation. I'm not going to competitions, but sometimes I have one day to perform if I'm on a trip, and then I've got another 9 months before I'm going to be able to get back to that destination. So there's similar pressures, but maybe not, quite on the, well, certainly not quite on the scale.
So when you're on your trip and there's like, this is it, this is your last attempt, like it's like your own private version of isolation, right? Like, here I go. Now, maybe, maybe you know what to expect, but there's echoes of that in your own climbing. I mean, I can speak too. So it was funny that Kyra brought up this. So if you take out a sports psychology textbook, you read about this. It's a conceptual model called the inverted U of optimal functioning. And there's sort of activation of the nervous system on one axis, and then there's like your performance level on the other. And you want to think about, so when I was working with the climbing team, and that was when lead, speed, and bouldering, when it was all together, which also has a crazy backstory. So we had this pipeline of athletes who were already traveling around the world, like focusing on, one or two disciplines. And then all of a sudden they had to do all three. And obviously like this sport performance team at the Olympic Committee was like, this sounds crazy. Like navigating one now, whatever. They wanted it was the Olympic debut and wants to show how cool the sport is. And like, I get it, but I don't know how anyone could manage three distinct, and I know sometimes we're combined, but like three distinct World Cup circuits. Like that's, it's like.
They didn't, they hated it. Everybody hated it.
No, I know. And people got injured and like we offed part of our pipeline. It was tricky, but the analogy works. So think about, where do you need to be in order to perform your best at speed? Like from your nervous system, like, I don't know, I would say like on average, like it's like kind of high, but like maybe pretty maximum. For someone who rests kind of low, like they're just kind of like they have that. Some climbers have this, not all, but like when you think about like surfers or BMXers, like they just kind of like idle, like kind of low. And then it's like the stimulation of the risk taking, that's what they're about to do. Like special operators like idle like that. And then it's like all of a sudden they get activated and then they can go.
Right.
So you've got to be there somewhere. But if you idle kind of quick, like maybe we need to calm you down, because maybe your body's going to try to move faster than this under competition, than the sequencing that you've trained for speed, right?
Yeah.
And we want to avoid that, right? Because you're not going to be efficient in your movement patterns. So you want to be at least aware, like, okay, if I'm normally kind of at a 9, as I'm like waiting for whatever the light, like I think I would prefer, at least conceptually, the idea of being a 7. So I have to have strategies to work with like my mind and my body to move myself down. Okay, I don't know, for lead, maybe it's something else. For bouldering, maybe it's something else, or depending on how intense like the problem is, so you just kind of reflect on that. And the point of this workshop was just that you are not this like a static state being with this like static state challenge. As you know, there's always like, there's the thing you've always wanted to, like the thing that was too big for you. And all of a sudden now you're getting so good and you're about to like approach it and accomplish your dream. And like, that's the story of every Olympian before their Olympic debut. Or there's the thing that you could do and then you had this injury. And like, now it's like, can I prove to myself that I can still do it? Or I don't know, maybe you had a baby or you took time off because you had to go to work. Like, there's all of these things that present themselves as challenge. And then so you want to think about, okay, like I'm this dynamic person, there's these dynamic challenges, but there is likely an optimized level of activation in the nervous system. So the purpose of the U, ideally, it's not too peaky, right? Because what are the chances you're going to get the activation just right? I mean, for athletes, like, they've got to perform anyways, right? The time starts and you're going. Or for you, you've made the trip, you've hiked up, you're ready to go. So we want to try to make that you have as broad of a top as possible, or make the athlete so skillful that they can figure out, even when they don't like the feeling, people don't usually like the feeling of a 9, because it's the fight or flight, right? Sympathetic activation, my heart's beating fast and I'm kind of sweaty and my pupils are dilating and I'm getting a little nauseous and maybe I have to pee. And if you can learn to reinterpret that, this is me getting ready. I don't like it, but I'm getting ready, right? And then I can go, and where to kind of direct your mind to prepare, to execute.
Yeah, I love, there's a few kind of dials here that I feel like we've touched on, and maybe if I'm understanding correctly, the first challenge for somebody like myself that's self-coached, and I don't have somebody like you that I get to talk to on the regular, is to first kind of understand, where do I sit? As you said, am I the more chill kind of surfer guy, or am I, a little bit more hyped up? Am I a 4 baseline, or am I an 8 baseline? So I kind of have to understand, where am I normally? What's my baseline? And then also having an understanding of, where do I perform the best on a boulder, or on a sport route, or on a multi-pitch. And so there's kind of first identifying those things, and then there's the knowledge of, okay, well, if I'm a 4 and I want to be at an 8 because I'm going to go rip a really hard couple of moves on a boulder, I need to know how to go from a 4 to 8. But essentially, before we can implement those tools, which I'd love to get into in a second, can you give any sort of advice to me and those who are listening on how to understand where we are and where it is we ideally want to be?
In a perfect role, if I'm perfectly well rested and optimally caffeinated and optimally fueled, I'm kind of at this certain number. But then those variables, they change, right? If you're trying to stay lean, maybe you're kind of hungry. And if you, have other stuff in your life, maybe you're not perfectly well rested. And
right.
Maybe you notice that if you drink too much caffeine, you rush, right? So maybe, or maybe your caffeine is optimized. Again, this is a conceptual model. So you want to just kind of think about, do you think you're a 4? What's your vibe? I don't know.
I'm kind of running this experiment as you're saying it, and it's very interesting. I'm definitely high energy, mind always worrying kind of, but I tend to be fairly calm under pressure. And so I don't know, things don't faze me all that much.
So the most basic model is activation in the nervous system, right? So when you think about that, you have activation in your nervous system, but it's not toned with anxiety. It's just toned with energy. That's how it is. I mean, over the years, I've drawn this out with a lot of different athletes. Okay, let's talk about, where do you need your mind to be? So let's say a gymnast who's preparing for balance beam. I need my mind really sharp and focused. I need it to be at a 7, but actually I want my body at a 4. No, it's going to be dynamic. And I mean, and when you think about maybe some of the really technical and gymnastic-y moves that you do when you're climbing, that you want to have power, but not so much power that, again, you're going to do too much for what is kind of this delicate-ish thing that you need to, control the motor action. And so part of it is knowing, how do I prepare? What gets me nervous? What, this what are the factors in my life that could throw me off course? What are my strengths? What's my story? The more you know that about yourself, and the more just kind of, I don't want to say comfortable, but if you get kind of pretty settled into that, it usually frees you up to perform well.
That is really interesting. I mean, God, the mind is just so wild when it comes to that, because ultimately you could step up to a climb and have the same exact physical preparedness and readiness every attempt. It's not like you're getting stronger or weaker, assuming you're recovering or whatever, between attempts over the course of a few days. Your physical ability is
hasn't
probably
changed.
the same.
Yes.
But you could have one where you float up the route and one where you can't even get your butt off the pad.
Correct.
But nothing's changed in your
Correct.
physical ability to do it. And so it's literally just what your brain is telling you can do or not.
Yeah.
And what are the tools that we can use, or the red flags or the warning signs that maybe help us to identify when we're not optimized for an attempt. And part of it, I think, is the regulation that we're talking about, and part of it is some of these other things, sports psychology and the doubts and the confidence and this, which I'd love to peel back on. But maybe if we stay on the regulation just for a second here, if I understand where I'm at in any given moment, and I think you made a great point there, which is like, I may normally be kind of an 8 because I'm a high energy guy, but maybe I had a really rough night with the kids who are up, and I woke up and I got like a jerky email from my boss, and I'm just kind of feeling down. Maybe I'm not an 8 when I show up at the gym or the crag. Maybe I'm at like kind of a 3 or a 4 today. Being able to recognize that is a fun experiment for us to just run all the time, just kind of checking in, like, where am I at? And I'm in line at the bank. Like, where am I at? It's kind of a fun, I think I'm going to just try to do that so I can know myself better.
This like an actual thing in mindfulness practice, and it's called like checking the weather. I mean, they're usually talking about checking the weather of what's going on in the mind, but for athletes, like you're using your body to do the thing. So why not like survey the scene in the body too?
I really like that. And it just is such a quick thing to be able to do, but such a valuable thing. Over time, I think we'll probably train ourselves to be a little bit more in tune with, okay, where I'm at. So now I know where I'm at. Let's assume that I have figured that out. And I'm going to either be low, right on the mark, or high for essentially where I want to be. And for me, if it's like I'm going to go and do a really hard kilterboard session with my friends, I want to be pretty high. Like I want to be able to recruit and rip some maximal moves and yell and, like just basically dump the full tank on this kind of thing. There isn't a whole lot of calm or necessarily even nuance that I need for a lot of that. It's like a max effort thing compared to if I'm going to do a really long 100-foot route out at the Red River Gorge where I'm resting and I need to recover on route and there's some fear because I'm climbing on lead. Maybe I'll want to be at a 5. And so if I show up low or I show up high, are there some go-to little tricks, tips, ideas that you have that somebody like myself or those who are listening can do to dial up or dial back?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, you can think about like substances to ingest. So caffeine is like an old faithful, and some people are more and less responsive. And depending on like, if you're using caffeine as a training tool, you don't want to use it every single day. So you'll be like, you'll have the best response. When I was working with BMX, they were like all, sponsored by these energy drink companies. Right. And we'd have to be like, that's great. You can be sponsored by them. You could drink it all the time, but then caffeine isn't going to work for you to help, support you in competition. So obviously like just be mindful of that. Okay. So let's talk about getting up. So central nervous system stimulants like caffeine can be helpful. Music can, like think about a fast-paced song or something with lyrics that really like mobilize you and like get you going. And sometimes using just like visualization, like imagining like how dynamic that is, or sometimes in baseball we'll like show like little clips from movies that like really get guys going, like you get like connected to the story and like come really alive, and like that's the thing that you're about to do.
Oh my God. Can you, I don't know, is there patient-client confidentiality here? I need to know what these clips are. What is getting the professional baseball team hyped?
Well, I mean, it's super individualized. So just like guys have like, they have their walkout song, right? So they have selected music that they're going to step out to the plate, right? So something like that. But
yeah,
like
I love that.
with a pitcher, like, in the like most recent version of Top Gun, when they're doing the training and they're training in that gorge.
No, I know exactly because I've seen it 100 times. It's like on my YouTube playlist.
Okay. Because somehow you love this. So just this idea, like a pitcher has to be like, they're hurtling the ball like 95 to 100 miles an hour, but they have to have this like surgical precision. They're not, this is not like a chucking a big thing. It's like this crazy laser, like, so some of them, as an example, love this idea of like, I can be fast and like dynamic and strong and like all this stuff, but like be super, super precise, because when they have really good command, like they're using their mind to direct their body with the spin and all this stuff to sort of place the ball exactly where the hitter is least likely to make contact with it.
Oh my gosh.
So
Lindsay,
it's stuff like that.
I love
but like,
this.
Yeah, think about how you could like Okay, so you gotta either like pull out your phone and like look at your YouTube channel, or you could even just like go in your mind, let that like recreating that image, like mobilize your resources. And I mean, even you were talking about like you and your buddies and you're doing this thing and it's so hard, and like with rowers that are with crew, like it is just going to hurt. Like you are just going to like, your body is just going to be screaming at you. And so we prepare the mind. Okay, it's going to happen. And you probably have some like genetic advantages that like it happens later, or when it happens, like somehow the way you feel pain, it just like doesn't register, but it's still going to hurt. So like pain becomes a signal. Where is your mind going to go? So I'd say, so for climbers, so for you, when you're getting ready with your buddies and you're going maximal effort, you know, it's going to hurt. And can you use the pain as a signal to like use your eyes to direct your attention to the thing? Or like say like this, like the pain is like this strength, it hurts, and like I'm stronger. Like there's always a way to reinterpret something. Of course you have to stay attuned to like, now I'm actually in the like in damage area and I gotta back off. So those are things that you can do to increase activation. Of course you can use like music to decrease activation, right? Like you can, something that you find like calming or soothing. We do a lot of like breath work, and the way, I know Kyra talked about box breathing, the way the breathing technique that I have the most training, that I've like researched the most myself and read the most articles about, is this thing called a heart rate variability. It's a biofeedback intervention. So you breathe in such a way that when you inhale, there's a slight increase in your heart rate. And when you exhale, there's a slight decrease. And doing that kind of rhythmically triggers a parasympathetic response. So like, let's say you're like overhyped, just temporarily, your fight or flight system, like the sympathetic branch is like really engaged. And we want it to like just kind of back off and like press the gas on the parasympathetic. So you go like in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, 5, out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5. And you do that rhythmically. And then you like can go like in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax your forehead, eyes, jaw, neck, like let the tension drain. You know, you do that a couple times, and I mean, you have to like practice away from this moment where you really want to regulate the activation. But then all of a sudden your heart rate starts to sync with your breathing, and you're like, oh, the deceleration. Okay, I'm directing my mind, so my mind can't like run amok because I'm nervous, anxious, excited, whatever, but I want to dial it down. So I'm using my mind and my body, the cardiac system, right, to trigger the parasympathetic response. And now I'm dialing it down. But you can also like, some people can like create a really like, I don't know, this like beautiful calming image. Like maybe you're in this beautiful mountainous place and the sun's just rising or setting, and you kind of go like, in your body, right? I mean, it's so
Totally.
personal, but like as examples, those would be things that you could kind of think about, plan. And you need to practice. You can't just be like, in the biggest moment of my next climb, I'm going to like you got to like rehearse it and see if it feels weird or whatever. And then use that.
Thank you for sharing those specific examples as well. I think very, very helpful for me to just understand what others are doing and what might be working for them. And it was interesting. I did an experiment on myself a couple months ago just with caffeine, and what caffeine do I respond to? And so like one day before a session, I did coffee. One day I did tea. One day I did like caffeine tablets. And it was very interesting that while the chemical compound of caffeine was probably the same, like the delivery vehicle was very, very different. And like coffee, I was like overstoker and I couldn't focus and my scalp was tingling, whereas the tea was like maybe not quite enough kick for me. And then the caffeine pill just ended up like being, for me at least, what worked the best. And so to your point, kind of experimenting similarly, I suppose I could experiment with different breathing techniques or different visualizations or different movie clips. Let's go. I'm so psyched for that.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, really understanding what, for me, for the most part, what I've experimented with is how to get myself more hyped up, because as a climber, I'm trying to be more of a boulderer right now. And so my kind of default has been to be a little bit calmer, because I typically would do like sport routes or trad routes, and I'd want to be a little bit more in control, a little more static, a little bit more kind of slow and calm with my mind. And so only lately have I been trying to like really ramp up, but I can see why being able to trigger the calm mind, even on a route, for example, like maybe I have to try really hard to get through a cruxy boulder section on a route, but then I get to a rest and I need to calm and recover because the climbing's not over yet. And so being able to like implement these things on the fly sounds incredibly valuable. And I'm sure things that professionals are doing in a much more conscious and deliberate way than a lot of us amateurs are. But, I think maybe that's even more opportunity for somebody like me because I haven't been doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you use your mind as a tool to optimize your performance, and maybe there's just like a greater percentage gain. Like with the athletes that I'm working with, we're usually talking about like, can you get 1% better or 2? Like, is this thing that we're going to devote ourselves to, like, actually going to move the needle? And then is it worth it? Is there something else? When I do a lot of like neurofeedback, so you put a sensor in someone's head and you like kind of like show them their brain waves, and then we like isolate into like a certain like frequency, like a speed of like how many times a second is a neuron firing, and it like means a certain thing depending on where you are. But we can do that all day, and then if you are not sufficiently well rested, like so for athlete, like if you're just like not in bed for, this is Olympic athletes, 8.5 hours every night on average. I mean, barring like jet lag or like do something crazy. If you're just not doing that, like you kind of shouldn't waste your time with me, because what we're doing here, you're just like robbing yourself of it. So I'm going to what are the inverse for you? Yeah, perhaps like focusing on like your mindset or the mental game can expose like more potential.
This is a great segue to talk about sleep for a minute, because as I mentioned at the top here, like I woke up at 4:30 this morning and just had this thought for work, and, it got me going. And, today is not going to be a performance day for me because I only got 6 hours of sleep. But also, I often regularly only get 6 or 7 hours of sleep because I've got 2 young kids and jobs and the whole thing. And I'm not a professional athlete, but that does seem to be on the top of the list of pretty much anyone out there. It's like, are you eating well and are you sleeping well? Cool. Yeah. Okay, then let's work on all these other things that could maybe, roll up to 5%. But if sleep isn't there, let's focus on sleep. So how do you focus with athletes on sleep if it isn't optimized? If we're not getting our 8 to 9 hours, it sounds like that's kind of the magic number.
Really, it's just this underappreciation of how crazily important sleep is. It affects every single system in your whole body. And it also affects your mind. It affects, your mood, your cognition, your physical performance, your reaction time, all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, we do a lot of like formalized sleep assessments, self-report, objective data, continuous sleep monitoring for the people who like that. And then just kind of checking in. Are you, so for an elite athlete, the approach that I would say is like, listen, you have made the decision in your life, or you have had the opportunity to pursue your athletic goals. That is it. That's the job. Mm-hmm. You can appreciate that sleep is your number one time to recover. It's when your body gets stronger and repairs itself. It's when your mind like downloads and encodes the things that you were working, like you were alluding to this like bouldering thing before. And like, hopefully before you're going, you're like, I'm going to do this and then this. Your mind is like surveying like the most important thing that like my shoulders got to be like this, or my hands like this, or I got to get my hip like you can like sequence it out in your mind. I would say you're setting your intention. But at night, all that stuff is getting downloaded. Like this worked, that didn't. Let's check out all those other things that I didn't really learn anything. Like that's super important. So if you do not wake up most days, I'm talking about for elite athletes, feeling like, let's go, I'm talking about not in the first 20 minutes of waking up. Some people are groggy waker-uppers.
Right.
But if you don't go through your day with the physical energy, the sort of like cognitive, like the thinking energy, and like a pretty good mood, what are we doing? You may not achieve your goal. No, becoming perfectly well-rested or more well-rested isn't going to guarantee you that you're going to achieve your goal. But like they've done these, Sherry Ma, when she was at Stanford, these sleep extension interventions. And it's like the most marvelous intervention of all time.
What is that? Sleep intervention extension?
The most hardcore version is, I would like for you to spend 10 hours in your bed every single night. And you're like, okay, lady, I can't. I got a job. I got some kids. I got to like take my dog out in the morning. Okay. All right. So you could say, on average, I'm spending 7 hours in bed, and I'm gonna increase it out to 8. You're not gonna get minute for minute increased time in bed.
All right, y'all. That seems like probably a pretty good place for me to fade things out here on this free intro to the Pro Clinic with Dr. Lindsay Shaw. I'm so sorry to do it, but that's kind of how I pay the bills over here at the podcast/utility closet, is by offering certain content for patrons and subscribers, let me tell you a little bit more about what Dr. Shaw and I discuss in the rest of this Banger Pro Clinic, which, by the way, has already resulted in me getting about 30 minutes more sleep per night as a result of just what she talked about here. Like, I implemented her sleep extension intervention and boom, it's already paying off. So we talk about sleep extension, we talk about relaxation techniques to improve rest and recovery, supplements to improve sleep. What's better, getting more sleep and less workouts, or getting a little less sleep and being able to fit in another workout? This is like a big weekend warrior kind of busy climber question from me. We talk about jet lag planning, foods that help us get better sleep at night, how to manage caffeine for performance and sleep, and also the effect of alcohol, THC, CBD, and Ambien on the quality of sleep. We talk about all that and loads more. Dr. Shaw really dug into the science of sleep and then very, very practical tips on what us busy climbers can do tonight to get a better night's sleep, which, as you heard her talk about a little bit here, is the absolute foundation for performance, not just in our climbing, but just in life in general. So don't sleep on sleep, y'all. You can get the entire Pro Clinic right now for free if you'd like by just signing up for a free trial over at Patreon or on Apple subscriptions. And then I'd love for you to stick around and support me in the show so that I can keep making great content like this. Huge shout out to Dr. Shaw. Thank you for joining the show. And to you, the listener, you are awesome. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you are able to enjoy the rest of this Pro Clinic. So if you want to hear the rest of this Pro Clinic, plus get instant access to more than 100 hours of other banger content, and I'm talking about Pro Clinics and bonus episodes from the likes of Adam Andra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Dave McLeod, Hazel Finley, Tom Randall, Alex Honnold, and so many more, it is all over there, and I think it's worth a few bucks a month. But if you don't like it, you can cancel anytime. No worries, no questions asked. If you're a Spotify listener, you can subscribe through Patreon right there in your Spotify player to unlock all of those episodes. If you're an iPhone person, you can do it right there also in your podcast player by just double-clicking that side button to start the free trial and to subscribe. Or if you like to listen various places on your computer as well as on your phone, you can just swing over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to support me there and get instant access to all of those goods. Now be sure to check your show notes for links from this conversation and how to work with today's pro, and you can see clips from this conversation over on IG at The Struggle Climbing Show. The Struggle is carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation and is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by Glenn Walker. All right, what are you waiting for? Pop over to Patreon and listen to the rest of this Banger Pro Clinic. I hope your training and your climbing are going great. And you know what? If you're struggling like me, well, let's just remember that the struggle makes us stronger. I'll see y'all.